All right, welcome everybody to the August meeting of the Admin and Public Works Committee. We'll get started with our roll call.
Councilmember Frost,
Here.
Councilmember Eden, Councilmember Nyan. Here. Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Jackson,
Here.
Councilmember Hopper, Councilmember Albers.
Here. All right, next up is our approval of minutes, but we're actually gonna move that to our September meeting. We gotta make a couple tweaks on that, so we'll do July, and August in September. That'll take us to public participation. There's nobody here in the room with us. I don't think there's anybody online.
Chair Farmer, there's no one currently online.
All right, that works out great for today. All right. Up first, under administration for information, we've got utilization of MyGov. You wanna do this, Tom, or you want?
I guess I can start off and kick back to you, Chair Farmer. So real quick, just wanted to provide a little update on MyGov and potential uses and utilization of it. So we actually went live with MyGov back in 2023, around spring going into summer. And at this point, we have been kind of perfecting it on the front that permitting has been working really well. In this case, we don't get too many requests on the service side. So one benefit here is that we have just recently hired a public works specialist that has got a pretty good background in tech. They're gonna be working to simplify the menu for residents. So in that case, it will actually be a little bit easier to navigate from the resident side and the user side. So that's one good thing, but also just streamlining communication. The goal of MyGov is to be able to put in a request and then track it. We've received the request, we've actually inspected the area, and then actually that person gets an email showing them, hey, we filled the pothole today, just for example. So just wanted to send out a reminder. I put out the department put out the actual URL here, and we will be kind of boosting MyGov over the coming months going into 2025 with the hopes that we can start just seeing more residents utilize the software. The department's available for any questions, but overall, just bringing attention back to MyGov and its potential application.
Yeah, one thing I talked with Tom and Mayor Garicano the other day, and I use MyGov a lot. I've started putting in all of my resident requests and different things that go in. I throw them in there. The nice thing about it is you can put that person's email and stuff in it so they can start getting communication about what's going on rather than kind of a game of telephone. And the other thing is, it is really nice to get these updates as they go. I've been working on a lot of tree stuff with our new arborist, and he specifically is great where, I'll put in a request a day or so later, he'll have picked it up and say, I'll go check it out. And he checks it out. You can see every step along the way, all the way up until it's done. And sometimes they'll even say, hey, this is a county tree. I've sent it to the county. Here are the people. It's on their list, but at this point, there's nothing we can really do about it. And while I don't obviously always love that answer, at least it is an answer, which I think is a good thing for our residents. So I would encourage all of you guys, if you haven't, to get in there and play with it a little bit. They are gonna try to simplify it, but it's a really good way to see what is going on and help our staff plan out what needs to get done, because it's a super clear way for them to track what's happening. So check it out. It's pretty nice. Yes, sir.
Just a suggestion, constantly get calls from people, not emails, but calls from people wanting to know, do you need a permit for this? Do you need a permit for that? I know you can go into the website and find out you don't need a permit. I'm just wondering if it'd be a little bit easier for people. If we had a link to that, even put it in a newsletter, you don't need a permit for garbage disposal if you're just replacing it. You don't, but I mean, that's the kind of stuff that they get overwhelmed when they get on the system. If it's something like a pothole, they're perfectly happy with that.
Yeah.
But they, because then you would depend on whoever's doing that work to get the permit. Maybe just a suggestion that might make it.
With your permission, Chair,
Yes, sir.
would that be kind of maybe maybe we put like a short list of the most common permits that are getting pulled here at the city, and then we have
There is a nice link on there, but you have to really dig to
Dig
find it.
Yeah.
And then when you find it, it says, do not need for this, except if you do this. It's like 4 or 5 pages long, I think.
So put that a little bit more readily available.
Yeah, because people say, oh, I want to change the top of my bathroom sink. Well, if you're not doing plumbing and you're not, you could just do that. But it's there. You just have to spend time looking for it. I just thought maybe if people are looking, trying to do it, I think most people try to do whatever permits they need, so.
Yeah, we've
Definitely
talked
put that
about
in the news.
updating the website at some point here soon and simplifying a lot of things, because it is complicated to say the least. All right, anybody have anything else on the MyGov stuff? All right, deer management.
Okay, thank you, Chair Farmer. So want to give you a quick update, just kind of see what's going on, and we'll also be bringing forth some information in September. Overall, the first year of our deer management program seemed to be pretty successful, along with the city council creating a deer management fund with $1 million put aside for deer management over the perpetuity practically. We do realize it's going to take a few years. We've been working with White Buffalo. The police have already conducted post calling surveys in both NE1 and NE2. That data has been transmitted over to White Buffalo, so they can actually put together a sampling analysis. They're gonna actually be able to put together something a little bit short and more succinct that's gonna tell us exactly what the impact was based off the data that was recorded from the police department. In that case, we're expecting that report this week to actually be turned in, so it's good. And the plan would be to utilize that data to kind of select the next area where we'll be going, but that will be included in a draft agreement with White Buffalo for year 2 of operations at the September meeting. So just giving everyone a heads up that that is to come here in September. We'll start gearing up, and right now we've been kind of pushing out both on our e-newsletter. We've put out in the Gazette, we have a full article on it, and we have a graphic, 2 things. The no feed ordinance, we have a graphic in the Gazette going out. We've been putting it on our new e-newsletter that residents should not be feeding the deer. We passed that ordinance back in 2022. On top of that, though, we also have a full-length article talking about the success of 2024 and going into 2025. But the key here is a QR code, but also a link that residents can go to right now if they live within, and in the memo, you can see there's the 6 areas that we've outlined. If a resident lives in that map and they are interested in the program, we want to hear that feedback first and foremost. We also want to hear if they see a bunch of deer in their neighborhood, if they're coalescing in their neighborhood. Those are good stats and good bullet points to put on there. But last but not least, if residents are interested in potentially participating in the program and having White Buffalo actually utilize it, take a look at it and see if it could be something that would be useful. We want to know that information too. And right now we're working to plot out that so we can have as much property access as we possibly can. The goal right now from discussions with White Buffalo is most likely to focus in on either NE2 with maybe, there was 2 spots that they wanted to go back to and NE1 to finish up. But overall, they want to put full focus either on right now, NE2 or Southeast 1. So that's right south of 100 and then the area north of 100 as well on the east side of 109. In this case, we have gotten quite a few inquiries from residents. Most of them are actually in West 1 and West 2, but White Buffalo has come back to us with, after a discussion with them actually just last week and said, hey, our specialty really is hunting in those really dense suburban areas. So they want to be utilized for that purpose. They think if anything, the numbers aren't great out there, but that's where normal, hunters that might be going there for the season, they would probably focus on that area anyway. So they're saying, let's go ahead. If you're going to use us for the areas that hunters are not going to be, which in that case would typically encompass the areas on the east side of 109. But we're expecting to have some type of draft agreement coming to MPW at the next meeting, along with the results of the survey should be able to back it up. But right now, just as for more information here with NE1 and NE2, those were able to be done this year right after the hunt was conducted. Unfortunately, the flowers bloomed after that point, and you need about a week for each individual area to actually do 2 transects. So in this case, we had to wait for West 1, West 2, Southeast 1, and Southeast 2. Those will be conducted in November with those results being presented to us and analyzed by White Buffalo in December. So in this case, we had to wait for all the leaves to come off so they have clear sight lines to be able to actually conduct a distance sampling that is outlined by the Missouri Department of Conservation. We're available for any questions. The department's available for any questions. So thank you.
Anybody got anything? Yes, sir.
Do we have any success stories from trustees for subdivisions that allowed us to use the common ground?
Yes.
This was a fantastic thing, and because they're kind of in the bind that everybody doesn't want their kids to see this happening or whatever. That'd be one great success story to try to open it up for some more. And the other would be where we've had properties that they were able to coordinate to come up with enough area to do the shooting. Any successes there?
In this case with the HOA, I know Point Clayton, and I know you know them. Point Clayton had a successful, it was very successful what they did with them. That would probably, if anybody, I would probably turn them over to, let them use their common ground. They actually ended up culling deer on the property. That was good. When it comes to putting together, 4 or 5 different homes in a dense area, typically that was not the case in year one. Year one, we found success with HOA common ground, or we found success with people that had they either had over 3 acres or they had around, 1.5. It was a decent enough spot where the hunting conditions outweighed the fact that it was a smaller property, but unfortunately, we had not been able to. And right now, we still do not have reports of 2 residents willing to work together to allow the culling operations to occur over the. But that's gonna be something we're gonna be pushing for. Right now, we're currently plotting them out. We have gotten, since we've been putting this feedback form out, we've gotten 40 residents that have reached out. A lot of them being in West 1 or West 2. That being said, a lot of them were also in Northeast 2. So Northeast 2 is kind of, we have data for it, right after the culling, and
I
then.
know, so I have 6 in my backyard every night. I could get with a baseball bat. Now I have 8. I have 2 fawns there. And the traffic on West Glen, they just stop and the deer stand right in the road and look at the cars. But they've been there for years and the yards behind us are pretty big and they slope down, but nobody has 3 acres, they're. But I just think that some of those areas, that's where they're, you can't do the schools. So once you start taking out the high schools and that common ground, you really do run into some challenges there, but they're getting hit by cars, unfortunately.
And that's typically the people that may have not had the most ideal properties or smaller properties that have participated. Typically, they either have hit a deer themselves or they, I actually spoke with one gentleman last year that let us use their property. And his son had just turned 16 and hit a deer, and that got him pretty fired up. And then he saw we were doing this program and was very excited. So I think it is something where I've spoken to a lot of residents that heard about it and they had called to, not support it. But the individuals that have seen the deer out there, typically they're calling and supporting the project. I would say every person that, it was a pleasure working with White Buffalo. We only received 2 calls throughout the entire program of concerned residents, and they didn't see them actually conducting culling operations. They just saw guys walking around properties and they had heard the noise. So that's really good to hear because they were operating in over 30 sites. So
I just think if you have something to go back to some of the trustees, because some of these have some pretty nice park area in them. But I think they're like, well, we just don't want to get up people all upset about it, but right now they're just going to nurseries and buying stuff 2 or 3 times a year. So they can.
And the HOA thing, there is, for West Glen Farms, we allowed them to go check it out, and just the way everything is set up, there was no good, there's plenty of space that theoretically should work, but just how it was configured just didn't work out, so they're gonna work through some of that stuff, but yeah, Point Clayton was very thankful and appreciative, so that was a good thing.
Good.
And a note on that too, and the thing is with, just to kind of show, it does take, they do filter through quite a few. We had over 60 different property owners that said, hey, you could use our property. But once we had Sergeant Wendland that went out there, he kind of took out probably about 15 to 20% of them. But then when White Buffalo came out, they wiped out half of the properties that were willing to work with us. So that's one of the issues too, is that when they go out there, like they did with your HOA common ground, when they actually see the conditions, they come back to the city typically and say, it's 50-50. It really does depend. If they have an area where they can get their the bait where it would be nice, but also hide their location, because that's the biggest problem. One note that I did want to mention was that they had highly suggested that we use drop netting. So in this case, that might be something that would be in the agreement this year versus last year. Last year, we did not have drop netting. What that does is when they are baiting them to the site, when you have a large collection of deer that come in, it drops the net on top of them to kind of hamper their escape so they can actually take out more at the same time. In this case, it would cause more of an impact on that site. That being said, it would be a decision that would be up to the city council. So we'll have that in the agreement coming to the Administration and Public Works Committee. But if you have questions or if you want to remove that piece, they are willing to do it without it, but they think that it would have a better impact if we allowed that practice.
Yes, sir. Thomas, when you and I talked, one of the things we talked about is maintenance, the idea of maintenance and the potentiality of using archery or something else. Can you either cover down on that now or in the next update, talk about that, whatever you're most comfortable with?
Yes, of course. In this case, so when it comes to archery, White Buffalo will not conduct that operation, but if we wanted to enlist more hunting groups, that is something that the council could eat. If tonight we want to have a motion to direct us to reach out to some of those groups, we can definitely get them back into the picture. Right now, though, it's been really just White Buffalo that, at least when it comes to organizations working with us, that we've been reaching out to.
Yeah, I guess I got the impression when you and I talked too, though, that there was the idea of using archers in the urban areas was not, encouraged or not believed to be the right answer. Is that?
Yeah, that would be my perspective in speaking with White Buffalo. That's, I mean, obviously, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest in that regard, but they believe that, well, we wouldn't necessarily allow archery hunting unless they had very high success rates. It's just no one really has the track record in the suburban areas, but what we could do and what we've been kind of thinking of, but White Buffalo's also warned, and they worked in Princeton where they've seen this issue. Where, a lot of cities, what they try to do is they either try to offset monetarily some, type of group that would maybe you'd pay them to get their tags, or maybe you would do something to make it cheaper or easier for the individual to go out and hunt. But usually, if you're gonna tie in with the city with that hunter, that private hunter, they need to pass some type of safety training. Because if they don't and they were to hit something, it would cause quite a bit of liability on the city if you were tied in with them. So one thing is, if you do set up like some type of safety program, you're gonna have to hire someone to train it. And most of the time you will see that a lot of those individuals, they will fill up their freezer full of deer meat. And then what will happen is they will, after they fill up their freezer, maybe fill up their friend's freezer, they are looking either for a trophy to fill up their personal freezer, and then they're kind of done for the season. Most and this is where there is hope here. The one suggestion that we did get, and what I've spoken to with a couple different archery hunters, but also sharpshooters, is that a lot of, and the Missouri Department of Conservation does work with Share the Harvest, just like White Buffalo does. And the goal here would be any excess meat that maybe they take out in the field, that would be taken directly to a processor, and we would cover the cost if it was a lot. But if it's usually MDC actually covers it if it's just one or two hunters that are coming in a month. But typically, what we've been told by the White Buffalo and some of the other experts in the field is that it's very difficult to get private hunter organizations. But you're not going to get the organization, but private hunters to make up that gap, if that makes sense. But I could have White Buffalo put something together on that topic and just kind of show what other cities have done.
So I think what I'm leaning towards, and just need recommendations from either you or Joe on how to proceed, is maybe a motion to ask the staff to come back with a recommendation for whether or not we should consider some sort of a I'm saying archery, but I'm not wed to archery. It could be black powder, it could be rifle, it could be whatever, but an additional hunting capability perhaps, or program to maybe address those areas that are west of 109, the ones that, where White Buffalo suggests that they are better postured to, hunt in the urban areas. Maybe we now approach the western areas with some other so I guess I'm looking for a recommendation from the department on how you, and that can either be in concert with White Buffalo or Wendling or you guys. I'm not wed to any one thing. So maybe a motion for them to come back with a recommendation.
Yeah, a motion to, I mean, if that is a recommendation, I think that's a good thing, because if it's like, I know at least in my neighborhood, probably also in Ed's and things like that, there's a lot of issues with the archery thing, but the big one is if you clip something and it gets away and then dies, then the HOA's got to pay to get it taken out, and then we got to figure out how the city's going to pay that, and those things are like $300 a pop, and HOAs will be unenthused about
Right.
that. But I do think, I mean, we could certainly, you guys could look into figuring out, if that is the best thing, because I think the other thing that maybe White Buffalo was suggesting was, we try to reach out to hunting organizations to partner with some of these places that we don't really have anything to do with. But if it's available, we can try to facilitate a connection.
Yeah, I can't help but think about, I know we had the one group that came out, the archery group that came out. And try to convince us that we didn't need to spend the money we needed to spend. I still feel like we chose the right answer. We're going the right direction for the city, especially for the urban areas. But perhaps for the less urban areas, more rural areas, west of 109, maybe partnering with either an archery organization or a hunting group of some sort. Setting up some safety parameters, et cetera. I gotta believe there's ample opportunity land-wise out there for the success.
So, all right, so I guess maybe it would be a motion to have the department maybe do like a feasibility thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that would make sense. And I would maybe have, well, two things. The motion could very well just be looking at alternative solutions to address West One and West Two
Okay.
while we let White
Yeah.
Buffalo coordinate the more suburban areas. With that though, what we could do too is that we've had a lot of people reach out from West One, West Two. Maybe it's something where we touch base with those folks and we can actually have them say, hey, would you be interested in allowing private hunters to come on your property and create that neural network to just at least connect the property owners to the individuals that are actually able to take out, even if it is, someone just fills up their freezer. If it's more than what was supposed to be here, more people than were supposed to be here, taking out deer, we're going to see a reduction in that.
Yeah, it could be Wendling managing the connecting of property owners and hunters. I don't know, I don't wanna tell you how, to skin the cat as it were, or whatever, but.
All right, so we've got a motion. Anybody care to second? Larry will second it. Okay,
Can you clarify what that motion is?
yeah, and so it would be I would say a feasibility study as to whether the city can be a connector or if we need to engage a different group, something like that. Just the city's staff's recommendation as to the next course of
Options.
action.
To look at other options.
Yeah, other options in the two western
West One, West Two.
sites.
Yes.
Good? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Okay, with that, that takes us to our 4 action items, and that brings us to our closed executive session. So if anybody is watching online, you'll see, I imagine, the screen that says we're in executive session. So just be patient and we'll get back to being live on camera as soon as we can. You tell us when you're ready, Tom. Well, I guess we need a motion to go into closed section, right? All right, anybody care to make a motion? And makes a motion, Tracy seconds it. Do we have to do a voice vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
No, roll call.
A roll call vote? Okay, roll call vote.
Aren't you glad I'm here?
Hmm?
Aren't you glad I'm here?
I am glad.
So then let's do roll call vote. That's the motion to go. What's the subsection? Is it the one on?
Oh, yeah, it is subsection. There's 3 subsections. It is RSMO 610.021 subsection 11, 12, and 14.
Chair Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember Frost,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens. You don't have this. Okay. Councilmember Nyan,
Yes.
Councilmember Albers,
Yes.
Councilmember here, Councilmember Jaxi,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Going into closed session.
And then you can put this out later, but usually-
Sure. live, Chair.
Cool. All right, as we get set back up here, we're gonna take a moment and get our Director of Public Works in, but our next thing on our agenda is a review of the biannual Gazette. I assume that's you, Mr. Lee.
Of course, thank you, Chair. So tonight, wanted to just bring up, we had just recently, if you aren't unaware, she was at our last EDC meeting. But the city recently brought on a new communications manager, Gina Tart. We're super excited to have her on board. That being said, we're currently working through our 2024 Fall Gazette. So in that case, we've been working through that process. Megan, our city clerk, has assisted along with now Gina, who started up. What we wanted to do, we've had some conversations, the department's had some conversations about this, and especially with the new addition of Ms. Tart, about the rising costs of the Gazette, doing it twice a year. And just overall, what, if anything, we could do to maybe enhance our communication differently, or, add to it. What can we do to maximize our dollars? What we did find was that the money that it takes to publish the Gazette has gone up. It's going up by, it was stagnant around around the $20,000 to $23,000 range for quite a bit of time. Then it jumped up to 26. Now we're at 27 at this most recent edition. We're looking to be right around 27 again here for the Fall Gazette. You can see on the first page here, the breakdown of the cost since 2021 spring. That being said, after speaking with our new communications manager, we actually found that only 7.68% of our residents from the 2022 citizen survey actually utilized the Gazette for information. So today, we're kind of talking about a couple things, how to maybe change our approach. Do we want to really bring up the discussion? Do we want to utilize those funds? I mean, that's 50,000, a little bit over 50,000 a year. Do we want to utilize those funds for a different purpose, enhance a different communication channel, or put it towards a different priority? Maybe move to more annual Gazette, or move to a opt-in type of method where individuals, if they want the Gazette, they can continue receiving it by either sending in. We could have it be digital, or we could have it, return the postcard and put the postage in on one of the editions. But the other thing is potentially using those funds to make there's a website called Issue. You could put videos on there and make compelling content that is still an e-newsletter. It's a newsletter, but it's more so putting in all the video footage that you'd like and making it more interactive, bounce out at you. And it's just more of a, dramatic, if you will. It's engaging for individuals that are utilizing digital formatting. And the problem here is we are seeing individuals, at least from the individuals that have answered our 2022 citizen survey, kind of move towards digital. We had 35.63% of the respondents back in 2022 that preferred social media as their way to get news from the city. And then 35.63 also favored the weekly newsletter. So it's an exact match, but that totals up to 70%. And there was around 700 or so individuals that answered that question, which is a pretty good representative sample. So it's really asking the question, are we still getting the bang for our buck? For the Gazette, doing about 25,000, 27,000 per edition. Do we want to maybe move to an annual? Do we want to do an opt-in? Do we want to do an opt-out? Maybe an opt-out might be more suitable for individuals if we want to keep rolling twice a year. But it does take that 27,000 only takes into account the postage, the actual graphic design costs, and then also the mailing and the actual publication of it. So printing it and mailing it on good paper. The staff time it takes, it's at least 15 hours out of myself, Ms. Tart now, Ms. Eldridge over here, and then also the rest of our staff writes the articles. So while we're doing all the other items throughout the day, we're drafting articles for this twice a year. So a lot of turnaround time. So it's just, if you add that up, you're probably looking at a much higher number than the 27. So a couple things that our new communications manager and myself wanted to kind of just talk about was, it's our 30th birthday coming up. Wildwood's turning 30 in 25, which is great. Do we want to maybe have a mailing that we do at the beginning of the year, kind of welcoming that 30th birthday, explaining, all the kind of the first half being dedicated to what's Wildwood done and its 30-year history, and then where we're going. So then at that point, we would talk about the year in advance, and then also talk about the event calendar, all those things, but then talk about where Wildwood is heading, quite frankly. Do we want to do like a special publication for the 30th birthday and have that go along with some type of issue we put up on there, and then also boost and potentially build up our social media accounts and to spend more time and energy getting digital communication out there, which our residents have shown they prefer, at least in the survey. Right now, to kind of gauge this, we've put together a quick survey. It's four questions on the Gazette. And we're gonna push this out the week of the mailing. We're gonna put out a really brief questionnaire that just asks how they value the Gazette and do they like the frequency, do they like pretty much how do they feel about it in its current form? And then asking this same question again, what's the best way for the city to get information to you? Our communications manager has noted that it is something that, you know, we may want to focus on our social and our website and put all the time and resources we're putting towards the, you know, the paper mailer we put out twice a year, maybe put that towards developing a mobile application. Not just for our parks and rec, but for the whole city. So it actually ties in this, the YouTube page that we're running on right now, and also all the agenda centers, things along those lines, which right now, we currently don't have an application just for that. So it's those types of things that we wanted to at least bring up. Tonight, though, we could have action if everyone feels one way or another on this issue, but we are putting that survey in the Gazette. We're putting it out. We're gonna put it out via social media. We're gonna put it out in the e-newsletter coming up in the early September. The goal would be to get input from residents on that for about a month or two and then bring it back here with the results. And that'll quickly say, do people read the Gazette? If they do they get information from it? And is it a valuable source of information? And then lastly, which is the best means to communicate with them? So, available for questions. Thank you.
Could there be an option, and believe it or not, I heard a lot about when we did away with calendars.
Yes.
I didn't know about that, and it's like, who uses those? I don't know, but people were still using them. So I guess my concern is the small, maybe portion of people that still don't get on social media or really don't even email, or maybe they don't have great internet or whatever. Those are the hardest people
Or no
to get
internet.
to.
I know.
Or no internet, yeah, or they're just not tech enough to even get on the internet or whatever. Could there be like an opt-in for that as far as even just a printed copy of like the e-newsletter or something that if people aren't able to get on or they forget or they're old school enough that they like to get it in their mail, they like to physically have something and a lot of these people are people that are very involved in the city and really like absorb it all and want to know all those details. I just don't want to leave a portion out that.
We could definitely provide that, and typically we do provide those type of accommodations, but if someone were to email us or give us a call and say, hey, I don't have internet, but I do want to see the e-newsletter, they could actually come up here. They'd probably have to do a records request, but it would take less than 15 minutes. We wouldn't charge them for that record. We would just print out the edition. It is an email form, but we'd print that out and it would show up like a PDF and we'd load the picture. So yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. If anybody wants we do that for accessibility on a lot of things anyways. If they wanted to have this e-newsletter or any of our items, they could come up here, we'll provide it.
So have you looked at different print options? You know, the current Gazette is a little bulky thing like, and
Beautiful, though.
yeah, oh, it's great.
This had to triple to quadruple the cost.
Yeah,
The old ones we used to do 6 a year,
yeah,
but this is a very expensive way to do it.
but I thought more of a straight booklet magazine would be less expensive, and I certainly think off the top of my head, once a year would be appropriate too.
So in that case, and I think that's the push. I think once a year is still very fair, especially to hit those certain components. But the thing is, what we found as staff too is that we're working on those projects we've reported back in the spring. Still, we're working through those and, you know, you're just not changing as much information up. You're just updating to update versus really providing fresh information, which you are gonna do on a yearly basis because you've passed a new budget, you've planned a new calendar, et cetera. So that's been one of the findings from the staff side. But in this case, that I think a yearly edition for something still nice like that too. I think a lot of residents have called and said they like that type of quality because it's something that, you know, you get those booklets, sometimes they kind of deteriorate a little bit. You know, like if you have the additional West News magazine.
They're a lot cheaper than this.
Yeah, it is true.
Fold that back down into just one chunk, would you please? So
Yeah.
the magazine I made was that size and it was stapled on the side. It was a booklet. It was super nice. You could do it one time a year is a year in review. You do everything else on Issue, so you can see what people are interacting with. For those of you guys that don't know, Issue is a pretty cool site. You can actually see how long people are staying on a specific page, how long they're reading something. If videos play, they can click the links and things like that. Tracy, this is a good thing
Yeah,
for you.
already tell.
But the idea would be, I would suggest you have an ongoing update with Issue as things are going, and then at the end of the year, whether it's Gina or the council or whoever, just decides this is the year in review piece that is gonna go out, and that's a printed piece that goes to our residents. And I know because, I mean, it was a couple years ago now when we did it, but I mean, that size works very well. It was a 32 page, when it's all done, book, 16 pages laid out. And it is not prohibitively expensive. The other thing that we did, that I would suggest we do, that we did then, a little different now with some of the different settings on Google and stuff, but you can geofence the city to do digital advertising, to just start letting people know that this is an option that's available to them, whether it's on Facebook or Google or whatever. And so then they can start getting trained to go to that thing, and then they get the mailer. I mean, the amount of money we spend on this is absolutely insane. It's like, that thing almost never changes, and it is $50,000 a year. That's
Yeah.
nuts.
We do mail to about 12,500 homes each year. So
Is that the number? 12.5?
It's around 12.5.
So that's
It's a rough number.
that's less than what I used to send mine to for about 4 times the cost.
4 times the cost or less than cost?
That is 4 times as expensive.
What were you, this was a personal business, your business, or?
It was for a real estate company.
Oh, okay, no, I didn't know what you were.
How many come back? I mean.
We've actually lowered that number significantly. When I started, when the department started, when I was started as city administrator, we had around 260 coming back, but now we've lowered that to around 10 each edition, so that happened recently. So yeah, it's.
That's a
The other thing that's nice with Issue is it's basically just it's a PDF that you load up there, and then it turns like a magazine and stuff, so it looks really cool. But if somebody were to call up or come up to City Hall and like want the physical copy, it's just a file that you print. It's not difficult at all. Just.
It's not gonna have the same formatting and prettiness, but it
It's not gonna have
would get
videos
the job
playing,
done.
but.
And is like the opt-in an option too? Like the West Magazine did that several years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it, if we were gonna send it out, I would do it as an opt-in rather than an opt-out, because most people won't. But I also just think, if we're in the habit of saying, we have $50,000 that we've budgeted for several years roughly for this project. It's the same amount of money, it's just gonna be spent in
Gonna be
a better
spent this
way.
year, right, Frank?
understand what it is and what it
Yeah.
looks like and.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, I
Center.
don't think it'd be too late. I mean, I think it'd be cool at Celebrate Wildwood to have a little booth up where people, you know, as we approach our 30th birthday, people can come talk about their Wildwood story, and then we can make a little piece out of that. It doesn't cost us much of anything.
Yeah.
Now we've got Gina, so she can figure all this
Yeah,
out.
that's one.
Alright, so what do you need from us then for the Gazette?
In this case, you know, if we want to try something different out, the department would recommend a motion to
Look at the options.
get the options or potentially.
Could we have, would it be appropriate, even though she's new, to have Gina put a communications budget together, starting with,
Yeah, we'll be doing that.
yeah, but I mean, like now she's got $52,000.
So are we getting rid of the Gazette completely?
I'm not saying that we are, I'm just saying it helps to have a jumping off point sometimes. And so if part of her budget is, well, $52,000 of that is sucked up by the Gazette and you have $53,000 to work with. She's gonna have a pretty easy budget conversation.
In this case, we can use 52,000 as the placeholder and see what would you do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah. In this case, the department's recommending a motion to explore what 52,000 could do if it wasn't used on the Gazette.
Anybody care to make that? Tracy will make it. Mr. Albers will second it. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions?
You know, if we have 2,000 new internet users, those people should be on there.
That's true. Very true. Okay, that brings us to Public Works. Under for information, we've got nothing. For action, we're starting off with the proposed new right-of-way management regulations. I assume this is you, Mr. Brown? Or is
Well, it could be either myself or Thomas.
And Mr. Brown could speak on to it. I'll add if I.
It's a really interesting reading, by the way.
Super
Very
exciting.
interesting reading, and I think you've read it before, frankly. Many members, we are wanting to move forward with these proposed new regulations. We're going to proposing to change how we permit work on the right of way. And add a great deal of new like requirements that give us a little more control and teeth relative to contractors that are doing work generally for utility companies on our right of way. So John Young has drafted a new section of city code for us. And we'd like to move forward with the legislation to put that in the full city council. And I think, so we're coming to you tonight with or I guess request for any final suggestions or changes or comments before we would like to do that next, potentially at September city council meeting. So that is, I guess the recommendation is to move forward with these regulations and submit them to the full city council for approval tonight, unless there's any changes or feedback that y'all have for us at this time.
Some quick notations too, if with your permission, Chair.
Yeah.
We are also having City Attorney Young update the application fee that's included in this these right-of-way regulations. In this case, they will have 5 subsections that were approved per the we are now getting to this is replacing with the special use permit. Now it's going to be called a right-of-way permit. Just a little change in that regard, but we're gonna have 5 subsections of permit fee, and we're gonna see a little bit of an increase in revenue from there as well. So that's something to keep in mind too. The 5 that we have, just because they were not included originally, because he did not have these on hand. We'll have the second here. You'll be able to get a right-of-way permit for a point permit and existing pavement or using directional bore with openings in existing pavement, so concrete. That's gonna be about 300 versus the 120 here per excavation. If you're doing it for linear pavement trenching, you're gonna have 300 plus $3 per lineal foot. A a right-of-way permit for just a point permit in grass, so it's not on concrete. And you're doing directional bore with openings in the grass. You'll have 200 per each excavation, and then if you're doing long stretch of land, it'll be 200 plus $1 per lineal foot, and then there's a miscellaneous section too that'll just be 125 per permit you pull. So in that case, it'll be a little different, but we're increasing the amount that we're charging. That's more cognizant of the staff time that it takes to inspect these areas. The inspection fee is included in that. And that was approved per the fee schedule, approved by city council in 2023. The other notation here is that we are also codifying the idea, and this language does need to be added, but we have in here that notification has to be given to residents. Obviously, without proof, you can't have it, so we did have City Attorney Young. He's gonna add in some language that photo documentation will have to be provided to the city, or it'll literally be that we do not believe that you did, if you did not provide that photo documentation. So those are two major changes that we have here, just want to make you aware of, but that'll be presented at the council meeting when we bring it.
We doing anything about like the pre-work pictures stuff?
That also is included. Rick, can you speak to that a little bit? I think there is a piece in here that covered that already.
Well, I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying. The requirement that's in there is relative to documenting your notice to the adjacent properties. It doesn't specifically call out the requirement to document the condition, other than they do have to present a plan to us. It says an engineered drawing, so the goal is to get the information that's provided to us to a much higher standard than is current for a lot of these utility companies.
Well, I'm just wondering, because we had the situation where they were using Google Earth to go back and try to figure out if there was a crack. And so are we not having that in here? Or can we not have that in here?
I don't know that there's a reason why we couldn't add that.
I think
don't
there was
it's
something we-
specifically stated.
I don't think it's
Probably
specifically
could.
stated either, but I think that was something that John said he was going to add.
So,
Yeah, we were gonna have him add the photo documentation aspect of it. We can just add an.
so Cliff, just so
Higher than
you
it
know,
is.
we had, in this case, AT&T came through my neighborhood. They did a bunch of boring and cracked driveways and whatever, and then they went to Google Earth to try to say that they were cracked before, or the crack was worse, or whatever it was, and instead of, they were supposed to have gone through and taken pictures of like the driveway. So.
Okay.
Thanks. So, yeah. So cool. What do you need from us?
Yeah, so the department, administration, Department of Public Works tonight would be requesting that the committee provide any input that you'd like at this point, but we feel pretty comfortable with the additions that the city attorney has mentioned. We talked with him today about bring this forward to the city council so we can get this enacted and considered.
And this is only if they're getting a grading permit, right?
So no, grading permit would actually be different. So if they are getting what now we call a special use permit, if they're excavating in the public right of way, they would be subject to these regulations. If they are digging on private property or in an easement, it's not owned by the city, then that would be just a standard grading.
Okay. And then is there a time period that's in here? Like, I know we go out and look and make sure that this stuff is right when they're done. But I just happen to be noticing when I cut my grass today that the rather large trench has sunk by about 4 inches in my front yard. Not that we would do with that from a city standpoint, but I'm just wondering from the right of way standpoint, if this stuff settles over a length of time, do we have a remedy to go back and get it fixed, or are we just kind of like?
One of the, I would say, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that there's an expiration typically on, sometimes you can get away with that with some trees, but and warranties on those trees, but typically once we do that final inspection, that does kind of close that door, because then at that point you're releasing either the escrow, or in this case, you're saying, hey, performance bond is done. So I don't know if we can, for perpetuity.
No, I don't mean forever. I just mean like, is it
In a year?
is it a year or is it 6 months? A season, however that works. I mean, I'm sure it sank in my yard because it rained for ever, but.
In this I would say what's presented in here does not have, it really is more focused in on when the city does its post inspection. So they come to us and say, hey, we completed our work. Please come take a look and then release.
Maybe a better way to ask this, have we had that problem, Rick, where like we've approved something and then a year later the thing sinks or whatever it is?
I guess I don't recall that specific instance. I'm sure there's been situations that have occurred, and I guess I'd say keep in mind that we do have some recourse with a lot of these utility companies because they're coming back for a new permit. So if it's enough of a concern that it needs to be addressed, we can bring them to the table and direct them to that issue and request that they address it.
As long as, I mean, I just, I know it's not always the utilities doing the work, and so they're not necessarily, like, I don't imagine our guys are going out there to make sure they've put enough gravel in the hole before they put the asphalt or whatever over it. They just assume they did it right.
Well, it's difficult to provide that level of inspection, I think is
Right.
the bottom line. Now, we try to do that and we try to have a higher standard when they are working in the street. And this will actually help us, I think, because it has more specific requirements in terms of backfill in the streets, so that we don't have a problem in the road. But, outside the road, was somebody there when they were backfilling that area? It's very likely that was not the case, and so if it's a serious situation that needs to be addressed, I think we can get them out to do it. It's possible that, these permits are gonna have an expiration date, and they're probably gonna be within a year, so if that occurs in 18 months.
It is what it is.
You may be able to figure out certain things, do that more than others. I mean, like, not to make too much fun, of it, but cemeteries, they overfill that because they know that in 6 months, that's gonna be down 6 inches, just in constant rain or whatever, so. As you have the different utility companies doing it, but I had a couple questions I wanted to
Yeah,
ask about this.
Absolutely.
How does this compare to the county or the state? Versus ours, so does Wildwood have a standard that's higher or equal to or greater than if I wanted to do something on a county right of way versus a state right of way? Is our paperwork 10 times more difficult? Our cost 10 times more expensive?
Cost isn't, right, these are pretty strict regulations, so based off, that was the request to make them more strict. Rick, I mean, you could speak to that, but yes, they are.
And I haven't looked at the counties, when we started down this path, I actually looked at the counties to look at them to see how strict they were for comparative sake. And my sense is these are more stringent, they have greater requirements. John Young based it, these large part on municipalities in St. Charles County that he works from, or works with rather. So my sense these are very current and relevant to the work that we're seeing. I can't speak to MoDOT so much in terms of what their current requirements are, to be frank, but I feel pretty comfortable. These are they're thorough and they're very stringent, and I think they will be very helpful.
So if somebody pays our permit, do they still have to pay MoDOT and they have to pay the county for those permits too, so that they all have to have individual permits if that right of way is in the city of Wildwood in St. Louis County and along State Road?
Well, if it's on a Wildwood road, they will get a permit from us and only us. If it's on a county road, it doesn't involve any of our facilities, it would be just a county permit. Now, the tricky ones that we get into are we build a path on MoDOT's right of way, or we are building a path on the road.
Right.
Those are a little trickier, and essentially, we have made the case to utility companies that we expect them to pull a permit from the city of Wildwood if they're working on or around our trail on state right of way. So I would say in that case, they would be getting a MoDOT permit and a city permit. Now, they could argue it and say they don't need the city permit potentially, but generally they haven't done that to this point.
I would just think that as we move forward with it, that's something that John needs to explain so that you can put it in the beginning of this, that you will need to do these things. Otherwise, you're gonna be bombarded with people saying, well, I have to do this, or maybe I don't have to do that. So that it's real clear to people as you're implementing a more stringent program, that doesn't take away from their responsibilities to have the others or to turn them in that particular order. But I just think that changes like this have a rippling effect.
Well, and what I brought up earlier with Thomas and city attorney is that we might want to have some kind of a meeting with the utility companies to go through this and explain the changes that are being presented to them, because it is definitely more explicit, and there's also requests in there for them to submit copy of their utility data to us, base maps of their facilities. We have not had those before. And it's in the code that they're supposed to provide that to us and update it once a year. And that would be hugely helpful, I think, overall, if we can get that information. But that is not something we've been doing in the past. But that would
Do you think they have it?
I've got to believe they've got have it in some fashion, yes. How open they're gonna be sharing it with us, I don't know. It may vary from company to company. We're gonna ask and we're gonna try.
I mean, I think we should continue to move on. I just think it's a bigger issue than just the council saying, hey, yes, we should do it. I think we need to make sure we know what the county and state will do, or what people have to do when they come in and tell you they don't have to do it. I just think as long as we know where we are in that whole process, I think that's fine.
All right, anybody, anything else? Anybody care to make the motion to proceed with the changes specified?
Do we really need to do that, or he's not ready to bring it forward? Is it we're waiting on the legal write-ups?
In this case, we could bring it back to committee with the finalized version before going to council, but either way, we were thinking council in September for introduction of this legislation.
I don't know, if you're putting a lot of legal stuff in there for questions, it might be nice to have some people look at it. Otherwise, I think you gotta do it and you wanna move it forward. It's just whether or not we look at it. I read through 10 or 15 pages, but if you're going back to change with the legal stuff and I read part of it before, so we just
I mean,
need
I
to
think
get
the
to
only two
certain point.
changes are really the communication provisions and the
Communication and the
photographs.
fees. The photographs, communication and the fees are gonna be changed, but in that case, I mean, we can definitely, I mean, the next meeting's before the next council meeting, so in this case, we can just bring back that finalized version here. And then have a motion at that point, so no action is necessary today.
Cool. All right, then, our next piece is the proposed consultant supplemental agreement for the Route 100 left turn projects.
Chair Farmer Committee members, this next item is pertaining to the project that we are undertaking to add 4 left turn lanes on Route 100. This is mainly on the 2-lane section of Route 100 west of Route T, so it's western Wildwood. We've been working on the design of the project with Horner and Schifrin now for a few months, and they've essentially gotten through the preliminary plan stage. Part of their work entails us going to submitting our plans to MoDOT, and then they do an environmental review to be sure that we're following all the federal environmental requirements that are required, because we are now using, as you know, federal funds or state funds to construct the project. So we found out more recently that MoDOT is making some of those environmental reviews more stringent, particularly the ones that are relative to cultural resources. So previously, that was more of a simple review and a completion of a form by our consultant and a submittal, and the review was done by state. Now they've kind of pushed that back on the sponsor to do that work instead of the state doing it effectively. So this additional work is not something that we included in the scope of the contract with Horner and Schifrin because we anticipated the state was going to do it, frankly. So tonight I'm coming to you with a request to essentially supplement the existing agreement to add in this work to do the cultural resource survey for the Route 100 turn lane project. Horner and Schifrin does not have the internal capability to do this. That's not unusual, frankly. They are wanting to hire a subconsultant at a local woman-owned company called Mound City Archaeological Services. So the proposal tonight is to approve a supplemental agreement with Horner and Schifrin so that we can hire Mound City to do the formal cultural resources study within the project area. The cost for that work would be $8,432.53. So if you approve this tonight, my ultimate request to council would be to increase the authorization under the agreement with Horner and Schifrin by that same amount so that we could execute the supplemental agreement to do the study. So hopefully that's not too complicated, but I would like to entertain any questions that you have.
All right, yes, sir.
Will they co-op that?
Beg pardon?
Do we have to pay the whole cost or do they split it with us on the cost share?
No, at this point, it would be 100%. Unless our costs come in below the estimated 50%, it'll be 100% city. Don't know that at this point in time, but I would expect it to be 100% city, frankly.
So considering that this is something that we have to do for their money, does this apply anything back to any of these easements that people want, that we're gonna have our process to where, is anybody going out to check to see if somebody's been buried along those easements? I mean, we're having to do it to get funding. But if we have a right of way easement or something like that, and we've been down that road with Old Slave Road and all this other stuff, who's responsible for, if that's part of the state now? At some point it comes down to the city, when somebody's getting into a right of way or an easement that we have no idea what's in there, we have to go and check that. Do they have to go and do that, or should we consider putting that into our program?
You talking about a private development project or a private?
I'm just saying,
subdivision?
right now, so for this funding is something new, because they're tightening that down, because that's happened in so many different places. If we run into a situation like that, where there's easement that's going to be invaded, you know, to put new underground lining in, or new water lines or pipelines, do those utilities have to do the same thing that we have to do for the road?
Well, it's my understanding it's really the federal funding that triggers the requirement. Federal law is what dictates the investigation. And MoDOT has followed through even with state funding, saying that we're gonna meet that standard. So if a utility company comes in and they do a pipeline project, I don't believe they are bound to that same level. Unless there is a permit or some other aspect of that project that's stipulated.
I'd just be curious. I mean, it's kind of interesting how it kind of always rolls downhill. But those are the types of things that probably exist everywhere, and you know, they're gonna have to, somebody gets stuck in the middle. So if we have to do it now because it's coming down that way, then maybe that's something we should look at. If that time and occasion would ever happen. We know there's several hundred private cemeteries in Wildwood. So you know, you always have that situation. How would you deal with that? Or I think we've changed it. It's not Old Slave Road anymore, but I mean, they wanted us to take that over right away, but you know, there's actually skeletons there alongside the road. That's not something that you want to get into. So I'm just curious if we have to do it for that funding. Or maybe the idea is as long as there's not federal and state funding in it, nobody seems to care about it. That could be the other approach.
That might be a good question for Joe Bonich in terms of private subdivisions when they're proposed in terms of the level of environmental requirements that are necessary. I don't know that we have anything in our code that explicitly requires that to be done. It's not to say we couldn't.
Actually, I'm kind of surprised it's as cheap as it is.
Yeah, it's not super expensive and it's been coming up on pretty much every project now. Been adding it in if you've noticed, but and then I think part of it in the past was these are areas that have already been disturbed. So the thought was, we're not doing any further harm. Why do we need to do any level of review? So it was very cursory before. But now they're taking it.
I just thought I just think it's something that we should probably have an opinion on from the lawyers before we change everything and realize now we have to go back and make other changes. And it could be as simple as if there's no federal funding involved in it, there's no requirement on our part too. But we do know it's a local issue. It's not new. We've spent lots of time talking about that. Tracy.
Just have a question. So this proposal letter says the cost is between $52.40 and $59.80. Is H&S also charging something for this to get to the $84.32?
They have included some hours of their time in this fee estimate. Yes, that's correct. And that's not uncommon. I don't typically sway that practice unless it's excessive. It's justifiable and reasonable.
Okay. I just want
It's usually okay.
Anything else? Alrighty, so you need a recommendation, approval of the recommendation?
Yeah, I would ask for a motion that would approve the recommendation.
Mr. Marshall makes the motion, Ms. Diane seconds it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. How about the public dedication of streets in Main Street Crossing?
Chair Farmer and committee members, this next item pertains to Main Street Crossing subdivision. If you may recall, a few months ago, we brought to you Brightleaf and the acceptance of the streets in Brightleaf. Both these subdivisions were started in the same time, more or less, around 2018, like 2017, I believe. So as with Brightleaf, Main Street Crossing is 100% built out, and the developer has completed the repairs that were dictated by the department, that were deficiencies that we identified. So from the department's perspective, these streets are ready for the city to formally take them over for maintenance and snow removal this winter time. So tonight we are bringing the recommendation to you to accept the streets in Main Street Crossing subdivision for public maintenance. 8 streets within the subdivision, including the portion of Main Street from 109 to Atherton Road that we would be accepting for public maintenance. It's about a mile total in streets. And I would make the comment that there's 3 alleys within Main Street Crossing which have been platted as private. Based on our policy, they are going to be eligible for public dedication as well. That is not included in this request. We've had some contact with the HOA. Pretty confident that they will be wanting to move forward with that request to also take the alleys and make them public as well. So that may very well will be coming to you in short order as well. The recommendations to move forward with the dedication of the streets. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
All right, anybody have any questions? Anybody care to make the motion? Mr. Jackson will make the motion.
Yeah. Cliff Ward.
Cliff's gonna second it.
Sure.
Excellent. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Any abstentions?
If it would snow right now, they wouldn't get the alleys plowed then. Right?
You have to do it for us.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly right.
All right, so then that takes us to miscellaneous items. Anybody have anything miscellaneous? I just had 2 quick things. The signage on 109 and Shepherd, which I guess we're repaving, right?
We are repaving Shepherd, yeah.
Those signs are super weird on 109. And it's like, it says road closed with an arrow, so it makes you think that you have to turn, but then that says don't turn. I don't know if we can make,
Road closed ahead.
yeah, road closed
That's
ahead,
smart.
turn, and then no turn left.
I don't disagree with you, council member. I'm not sure I have a better
Enter at your own risk.
So like, I don't know if we could just take that, I was happened to be driving with my daughter and she freaked out, and then I was driving myself and I was like, are we closed on 109 right now? No, what's happening? So I don't know if it's to take that left turn sign off the road closed ahead thing or something.
It's confusing.
It's confusing.
We can certainly have that discussion. I'm hopeful that they will be moving it very soon.
Okay.
That'll be a non-issue. In fact, I'm going to be looking very hard when that happens. The school session is starting up very soon too.
Right.
So I think the desire is to get that open.
Yeah, I think you got like a week and a half left. And then the last thing was just a question for, I guess, for you guys. I spoke with Larry about it before he left. I don't know that there's anything we can do when it comes to the main council, and I understand why we have some of these things, but like, I definitely don't need a giant printout of all
I
this stuff
was just thinking that.
every meeting.
Please stop.
If,
usually.
I don't know if you guys need to have us tell you to, if you guys want one and you wanna send an email in or whatever, that's cool, but like, I don't think we need to print 8 million of these things every week.
Yeah.
It just seems like such a huge waste of paper
Time.
Time.
and time and everything else.
Can we go the direction you're suggesting, which is if we need a paper copy, we
Yeah.
will tell you,
In
otherwise,
that case,
don't print it.
could we, officially then reach out to Rick or I if you'd like a physical
If you-
copy and we'll make sure you got one printed.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's something that like is super pertinent that you guys feel like we have to have sitting in front of us, I just like, this is, I feel awful every time when I throw this in the recycle bin.
Do we have a requirement to do it for the public if the public shows up?
There's a reasonable accommodation, but they should be making that request. We could theoretically. Yeah, we could theoretically have that. Well, they can jump on our public Wi-Fi, and if they were to have a device, we could put like a QR code or something.
Yeah,
We'll typically put, we don't get too many visitors here most of the time. We could put out maybe 1 or 2 copies of the agenda and the supporting documentation on that table out there, but when it comes to the council, we can have that draw back a bit. As long as, if someone here though wants a consistent copy, that's fine too. We just wanna make sure you need it, you have it, but if you don't, then that's okay.
I genuinely feel like we could do it for the council
Yeah,
as
I
well.
was gonna say, I mean, there are a lot of times we get stuff digitally that isn't on the printed stuff. I mean, I think if you had a QR code that's like, this is easy, just click this and you can look at it and actually click the attachments and see them. To me, that's infinitely simpler than.
You could even put it on the screen at the beginning of the meeting, the QR code while we're waiting for the meeting to start that says.
Yeah.
Go here if you need the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
cause this is, I mean, I have no idea how many pages we print, but it has to be.
So do we legally have to keep our emails on that stuff for a certain amount of time, correct? Like the meeting agenda aren't we supposed to?
Forever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We don't have to keep it, but they
oh,
but like they'll have it, cause it'll be digital, it just won't be.
keeping the records.
Oh, yes, we keep the record.
right, well, I thought council members had to keep their emails.
The city does it through our city email
Server.
accounts, we don't
It's
have
on the
anything to do
server.
with it, yeah.
Okay.
If you use their city email
I thought
address.
in
they have
my,
it all.
I thought in my orientation, something was said about that.
Usually, at least what they used to say was, you wanna not use your personal email.
Well, yeah,
Because then that then becomes your responsibility,
right,
so.
I thought there was something about keep
Yeah,
retaining.
it's retained in there automatically for us for the most part. So if you want a motion, I don't know if we can do that now, but I would really encourage you guys to just stop with all the printing.
I don't think, as long as it's an understanding here, we'll stop printing, provide 2 paper copies and a QR code.
And I mean, I would maybe even talk to the other committees and the council's the same thing, like I
Yeah.
don't. It's,
Save our printing budget.
well, it's that, but I mean, especially because when we get a lot of people that actually do come, it's usually for like a development or something, and sometimes those things have shifted between the time they were printed and what we're looking at. And then there's just sort of this like, why is it different than what I'm looking at? It just creates a conversation we don't.
The
need to
council,
have.
the council meeting, the table is loaded up with,
Yeah, every month, right?
right, yeah.
But so having like a, you know.
So part of the challenge is that as we went from a paper world and faxing everything, is the fact that when we first got the or the iPads,
Mhm.
everybody was trying to use notebook and put stuff on it. We'd get to a meeting and people couldn't find it, couldn't get to it.
Right.
And then it was like, well, we just need to print them out then. Or you give somebody a 20-page document, try to get everybody in here to get it the same place. Then they decide, well, let's go ahead, we'll put it up on the screen in
Yeah.
order to do it. So I mean, tried a lot of different ways. And there are some that, you end up saying, I just need to print up because I got 6 notes on it or something.
And there are gonna be some council members that will insist on having the paper copy.
Sure. Yeah.
They always ask for a paper copy. I just,
In this case, maybe what we do is, no motion, I don't believe is necessary, Chair, but if we do, we can send out, when we send out the agenda for the next meeting, we could say in the email, we can continuously say in the email, hey, respond to this email that you want a paper copy and we'll print one out for you. If not, we'll have 2 paper copies there. If no one's here, then it's kind of an emergency copy if someone wants it once they sit down. And anything that's like a map or if it's a visual, we could have just for this committee, we can kind of broad basically focus it.
and if you wanna do it normal for the next council meeting, and then one of us can bring it up in miscellaneous at the end of the council meeting that, hey, we've elected in our committee to stop with all of the dead trees.
Could ask Megan if anybody's requested packets printed out anyway.
Typically packets, the full packets typically only printed out for myself and the mayor.
Yeah,
Um,
I talked to her about it.
I know some committees, historic preservation gets a lot of printing.
Yeah, yes.
Just telling you, they do.
Those are big-
That is true. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, if we can, wherever we can save on that stuff, it's probably
Right.
best.
Time as well.
Yes,
Yeah, for
Well,
real.
that's good feedback.
that is good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, our next meeting is going, oh, sorry, does anybody have anything else? All right, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 3rd. And with that, we can have a motion to adjourn. By Ms. Diane, seconded by Mr. Jaxi. Non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone want opposed or want to stick around? Excellent.